Ever get that feeling like you're being watched, not by the cameras, not by the crowd, but something deeper, something that doesn't blink, doesn't sleep, something that sees everything, the lies you tell, the masks you wear, the little shortcuts you think no one notices. Yeah, that feeling. It's not your imagination. It's not paranoia. It's a presence. Silent, unshakable. Sent by someone who doesn't play dice with the universe. You're being watched for a purpose, not by accident. Not because the universe slipped up and accidentally focused its lens on you. No, this isn't some random flicker in the system. This is intentional, deliberate, like a sniper's gaze, locked in, patient. You've felt it, haven't you? That sensation that you're not alone. Not just the room, empty, but heart racing, kind of not alone, but the soul knows kind. Like something ancient and intelligent is paying attention, not to what you show, but to what you hidey. And here's the thing, most people, they crave attention, beg for it, drown in filters and noise trying to manufacture it. But this isn't the kind you ask for. This is the kind that finds you. This watcher isn't here to applaud. It doesn't care how many followers you have, how polished your words sound, how safe you play it. No, it's watching for something else. Something buried, something dangerous, something real. You've got something inside you that hasn't been activated yet. That's what the watcher is here for. Not your comfort, not your convenience. Your potential, the ugly kind, the kind that makes people nervous, the kind that could set fire to everything fake if you ever stop pretending. That's why it's here. Because deep down, beneath all the distractions and delays, you were built for impact, real impact, the kind that shifts atmospheres, cracks foundations, breaks cycles. You think you're small. You think you're irrelevant. Then why are you under surveillance? Why is something bigger than your whole existence keeping tabs on you while others fade into the background? That doesn't happen by mistake. That's not coincidence. That's strategy. Because you're not as hidden as you think. You're not as invisible as you've convinced yourself. You've caught attention, divine attention, and that's never casual. You've been walking around like a civilian in a war zone, like your choices don't echo, like your apathy doesn't ripple. But when you're chosen, nothing is neutral, not your silence, not your delay, not your excuses. The watcher sees it all. And it's not judging you like a court. No, it's measuring you like a weapon, calculating your readiness, watching how you react to pressure, to temptation, to failure. Because someone in power doesn't watch the finished product. They watch the EV process. And you've been under review since the first time you felt out of place. Since the first time the world didn't fit and you thought it was your fault. It wasn't. That discomfort, that was the mark, the sign, the beginning of the scan. See, they don't track people who blend in. They track the ones who might wake up one day and tear the curtain down. The ones who don't just want truth, they become it. That's you. Whether you like it or not. The most dangerous lie you've believed is that no one's watching. That no one cares what you do behind closed doors. But someone in power sees everything. The thoughts, the hesitations, the sparks. Every time you almost stepped forward and didn't. Every time you shrunk instead of speaking. Every time you chose silence over obedience. It's all part of the observation, all part of the file, not for punishment, for deployment. Because this isn't a game. This isn't dress rehearsal. You don't get this kind of attention just to fade out quietly. You're under watch because there's a shift coming, a moment, a window, a strike point. And when it hits, they won't be looking at the loudest person. They'll be looking at you. The one who was being prepared in secret, the one who was watched when no one else noticed, the one who thought they were overlooked when in reality they were being scanned by power itself. Divine attention isn't comforting, it's convicting. See, people hear God is watching, and they smile like it's a bedtime story, like it's supposed to make them feel safe, warm, wrapped in some holy blanket. But if you really knew what it meant to be seen by that kind of power, you wouldn't be smiling. You'd be sweating, because divine attention, it doesn't coddle, it confronts. It doesn't pat your back. It flips the mirror and dares you to look. You ever stood in a spotlight when you're not ready, when you're messy, hiding things, trying to keep your cracks tucked in behind polite smiles and spiritual phrases? That's what this is like. Accept the light. It's not interested in what you want to show. It's burning through your layers like paper. You think you can hide behind your excuses, your delays, your "I'm not ready" speech. That's cute. But the one who's watching sees through time, through pretense. Through every clever lie you've rehearsed so well, even you believe it now. People want God's presence to feel like peace, like a vacation. But real presence doesn't feel like peace. It feels like pressure, holy pressure. That kind that makes your stomach twist when you're about to make the wrong move. That fire in your bones when you're about to play small. That weight on your chest when you're running from the very thing you're called to do. That's not anxiety, that's conviction. That's what it feels like when power is close and you're not living up to it. It's not comfortable to be seen by someone who knows what you're capable of. It's not relaxing to be watched by someone who remembers what he put inside you when you've been pretending to forget. You think divine attention feels like applause. Try accountability. Try standing in front of someone who knows exactly what you could have done and didn't. Not because you couldn't, but because you wouldn't. You chose comfort. You chose distraction. You chose to stay quiet, and he saw all of it. The scariest thing about being under divine surveillance isn't that he sees your failures. It's that he sees your potential, and he keeps watching anyway, watching you scroll past your purpose, watching you decorate your cage and call it self-care. Watching you tell yourself it's not the right time, like he doesn't know the exact second your moment was supposed to begin. You don't get to lie to someone who sees the blueprint. You don't get to act powerless when he's the one who handed you the fire. And here's the twist. His attention isn't passive. It comes with expectations, with assignments, with thy weight. You want to be seen, right? You want to be chosen. Then you better be ready for what that really means. Because when he locks eyes on you, it's not for decoration, it's for deployment. He's not just watching to watch, he's watching to unleash. But not until you face the gap between who you are and who you pretend to be. Divine attention demands a response. It demands action, change, movement. But people want to be watched without being moved. They want to feel special without being stretched. They want presence without pressure. But it doesn't work like that. Not when the one watching has plans for you. Not when his gaze comes with responsibility. You've been marked, tagged, not for pity, but for purpose. And he's not looking at your resume. He's not watching your public image. He's staring dead into your potential. and waiting to see what you'll do with it. Your silence and excuses are being recorded. Every time you bite your tongue when you were supposed to speak. Every time you shrink when the room needed your weight. Every moment you convince yourself that it's not my place, or maybe later, or I'm not ready. It gets logged. Not in some notebook with your name scribbled in red ink. No, it's deeper than that. It's etched into the timeline you were meant to alter. Like skipped beats in a rhythm only heaven knows by heart. And it notices when you go off tempo. You think silence is neutral. That not doing something doesn't count. That keeping your head down means you're safe. But silence isn't safety. It's a statement, a loud one, louder than your speeches, louder than your staged confidence. It says, I see the fire, but I'd rather stay cold. It says, I feel the pull, but I'd rather not move. And that excuse you've been recycling, that pretty little phrase you use to cover the discomfort, it's not hiding you, it's or defining you. You think God sent someone to watch you just to grade your performance. No, this isn't school. This is war. And in war, hesitation can be louder than betrayal. Delay can be as dangerous as denial. You think the mission pauses because you're tired, because you didn't feel like it. That's not how purpose works. Purpose doesn't wait for your permission. It moves. And if you don't move with it, it keeps going without you. But the silence you left behind, it echoes. See, your life is surrounded by moments, divine openings, cracks in reality where your voice was meant to thunder through, where your presence was supposed to change the outcome. But instead, there's just nothing, dead air. You were waiting for a sign, but the S sign was you. And the watcher, he doesn't miss a beat. He sees every almost, every maybe, every not today, every what if I fail, and what will they think, and I'm not enough. He hears it all. He hears the truth you didn't speak and the strength you didn't use. People love to say, God knows my heart. Oh, he does. That's the terrifying part. He knows exactly what's in you. And he watches you walk around like you're empty. You keep selling him this quiet act, hoping he buys it as humility. But it's not humility. It's fear in disguising. And that fear, it's costing more than you realize. It's not just about what you didn't do. It's about what could have happened if you had. Excuses sound smart when you say them out loud. They make you feel protected. But excuses are just delay dressed in logic. They're chains with charm. And the longer you wear them, the more normal they feel. You've been telling yourself the same story for so long, you don't even question it anymore. But the one watching, he questions it. He watches you limp when he built you to run. He watches you apologize for your fire like it's some kind of flaw. You think you're being overlooked, but in reality, you're being observed closely, intentionally. Not because you've failed, but because there's still time. Because your silence isn't final yet. Because even now, the watcher hasn't looked away, not once. He's still tracking every flicker of hesitation, every breath you hold back, every word you swallow. And he's not collecting this data to punish you. He's waiting for the moment when you finally break the silence, shatter the excuse, and air become the sound that was missing this whole time. Only those with potential are placed under surveillance. You think everyone's being watched like this? You think every soul walking around gets this kind of attention? No, that would be a waste of energy. The ones who are empty, numb, running in circles, they don't need to be tracked. They pose no threat. They move, but they don't shift anything. They breathe, but they don't shake anything. It's only the ones who carry something dangerous, purposes, who get the eyes on them. It's not about popularity, not about being loud or visible. It's about weight, spiritual weight, the kind that bends atmospheres when it enters the room, the kind that heaven marks and hell fears. That's the kind of potential that puts you on the list. Not a list you see, not one you signed up for, one written before you ever learned how to fake being small, before you started convincing yourself that being low-key was a strategy and not just fear with lipstick on. They're not watching you because of what you've done. They're watching you because of what you could do, what you're wired for, what you haven't even touched yet. There's something in your bones, in your voice, in your story that wasn't meant to stay dormant. And the watcher, he's not distracted. He sees it all, even when you're hiding. Especially when you're hiding. That's when the potential shines brightest. When it's under pressure, under layers, under shame, under lies. The ones who get watched are the ones who might break patterns, who might interrupt the cycle, who might wake up and start speaking in a language that sets people free. That kind of soul. You don't let that run loose without a tracker. You keep eyes on it. You study it. You wait for the moment it either explodes into greatness or implodes from fear. But either way, it's active. It's dangerous. And that's why the gaze never leaves. You ever wonder why you feel pressure others don't? Why your failure feels heavier? Why your silence feels louder? That's the weight of expectation. The invisible contract you didn't sign, but were born into. The divine alert that went off the moment you stepped into the room with a fire you didn't ignite. Most people get to coast, not you. You get checked, tested, measured. Not because you're weak, but because you're not allowed to be. And no, you're not crazy for feelings like something's always keeping score. You're not paranoid. You're a market. And the mark doesn't disappear just because you got tired or scared or numb. It stays. Because potential doesn't vanish. It just waits. It sits there like a bomb until someone's brave enough to stop ignoring the beeping. And the one watching, he's not worried about your flaws. He's watching for your fire, for the moment it gets tired of hiding. Potential isn't some compliment. It's a threat to every system, every lie, every generational weight trying to sit on your chest. That's why you're watched. Because the moment you move in truth, you change things. The moment you speak without shrinking, something cracks. That's why you've been targeted. That's why the resistance hits harder. That's why the silence you carry feels so loud. Because someone knows what happens if you wake up. If you step out of autopilot. If you stop negotiating your identity. This isn't about being special. This is about being necessary. And when you're necessary, you don't get to hide. You don't get to disappear. You don't get to downplay the call just because life got loud. The watcher doesn't lose focus when you do. He stays locked in because he knows something you've forgotten. If you ever start moving like you were designed to, nothing around you stays the same. Pressure is proof of your calling, not punishment. But you treat it like a curse, don't you? Like life's just picking on you. Like you're the unlucky one, always getting hit, always carrying more than you think you can handle. Crying out, why me? Every time the weight shows up. But what if the pressure isn't random? You've been walking around like no one notices. Like your existence is some side note in the grand story. But here's the twist. The ones at the top, the ones who don't blink unless there's a reason, yeah, they've noticed. They've been watching silently, patiently. Not the surface stuff. No, that's too easy. They saw past the noise, past the pretending, past the I'm fine and the watered down ambition. They saw the flare inside the fog, and now they want a closer look. Attention from the top means your silence made noise. Funny, isn't it? You spend all that time thinking you're invisible, that staying quiet keeps you safe, that blending in will help you survive the chaos. But the thing is, silence screams, especially when it's coming from someone who should be roaring. See, the watchers at the top, they don't care about noise made for show. They ignore the clowns yelling for attention, the puppets pulling strings just to be seen. No, they're scanning for his disruptions, subtle ones, quiet ones, the kind that ripple through systems without ever raising their voice. You didn't even notice you did it, did you? Maybe you moved differently. Maybe you didn't buy into the lies. Maybe you chose restraint when the world demanded performance. Or maybe, just maybe, you stopped playing their game. That's the moment they heard you. The moment your silence cut through all the static like a razor in the dark. And now the ones at the top, they're curious. That kind of silence doesn't come from confusion. It comes from power, from control, from someone who knows exactly what they're carrying, but hasn't unleashed it yet. They saw you sitting still while everyone else panicked. They watched you hold back while the crowd chased validation like candy. They noticed that you were watching too, calculating, weighing, observing the madness. And that kind of silence, it's unsettling. It's not silence at all. It's a strategy, and that's what sets off the alarms. You weren't hiding, you were waiting. And those who wait with intention are more dangerous than those who scream with no plan. That's what caught their eye. You think you've been overlooked, that your time hasn't come, but from up there, you've been glowing like a target, not because you made noise, but because you didn't. Because your presence was felt in the absence of sound. Because when the room got loud, you laughed and didn't flinch. That's not apathy. That's focus. That's weight. And the top level watchers, they don't miss weight. They monitor shifts in atmosphere. You didn't speak, but you altered the temperature. You didn't act, but something and changed. And now they want to know why. They don't send scouts for echo chambers. They don't study people who conform perfectly. They zone in on the ones who pose a risk to the order, the quiet ones, the restrained ones, the ones who aren't trying to be seen because they already know they are. You never needed the spotlight, and that's exactly why it's finding you. Because people who don't chase attention are the ones who know how to wield it. They started watching when you stopped begging. When you started moving like someone who wasn't waiting for permission. You thought they didn't see you, but the second you chose an intention over applause, the top took notice. You became a variable they couldn't predict, a silence they couldn't decode. And now they're circling, watching, leaning in, not to clap, not to cheer, but to assess, to measure what kind of threat your potential really is. Your silence wasn't passive. It was a message. And that message got delivered loud and clear to the rooms you didn't even know were listening. You didn't knock on the door. You shifted the building. And now the ones who built it want to meet the reason the foundation shook. You're being studied for your potential, not your past. They already know your past. Every fall, every failure, every little breakdown you swore would be the end. They've seen it all. It's not interesting. It's predictable. Pain, regret, struggle, everyone has that story. What they care about isn't where you've been. It's what you haven't stepped into yet. That thing you've been hiding. That spark under the surface. That weight you carry in your chest that no one else seems to notice. But they do. Oh, they notice. Because potential, that's dangerous. It's not loud. It doesn't wear a label. And it doesn't come with a warning sign. It walks in quietly and shifts the entire equation. That's why they study you. Not because of who you were, but because of what you might become if nobody stops you. And that's the game, isn't it? Not to punish you for your past, but to calculate the threat of your future. To assess whether you'll use what's been buried in you or let it rot. Because if you do use it, things break. They're not watching your failures like you are. You obsess over them, replaying every mistake like a broken record. But they're looking at the places where you should have collapsed, but didn't. The moments you could have snapped, but stayed silent. You call it weakness. They call it restraint, You call it a breakdown. They call it pressure tested. Because surviving what you did and still showing up, that's not shameful. That's proof. Proof you haven't even scratched the surface yet. And that terrifies them. See, the ones at the top. They know how this works. They've seen raw potential rise before. And when it's ignored, it fizzles. But when they've harnessed, it changes landscapes. So they study you closely. They dissect the way you speak, the way you move, the way you don't move. Every delay, noted every hesitation, tracked. Because what you carry could either reshape the system or become its slave. And they need to know which way you're leaning. They're not interested in your highlight reel. They're listening between the words, watching for the parts you think nobody sees, the way you flinch when truth hits, the way your eyes narrow when you hear something that challenges you. They're looking for activation, not perfection. For the moment your potential stops being theoretical and starts being kinetic. That's when things get real. That's when observers become opponents. Because potential that moves is a threat. You've been treating your gifts like accidents, shrinking down every time someone points them out, laughing them off, hiding them behind excuses like not now or not me. But they see through all that. They see the blueprint behind your eyes. They see what could be built if you stopped trying to be small enough to be loved. That's what they're studying, the possibility of you. The version you keep trying to mute, hoping it'll just go away. But it won't. It wasn't designed to stay quiet. It was designed to erupt. You're being watched because you're still unfinished, and that makes you volatile, unpredictable, dangerous in all the right ways. You don't even realize what you're carrying, but they do. That's why they haven't looked away. Not for 1 second. Because if the switch ever flips, if the potential ever becomes purpose, you'll stop being a subject in their little study and start becoming a force they can't contain. Your silence and excuses are being recorded. Every time you say, "I'm not ready," they take note. Every time you pretend not to hear the call that keeps showing up in your gut, they log it. You think nobody's watching just because nobody's clapping. Cute. But the truth is, every delay, every excuse, every moment you sit on your hands while the fire inside you burns is being documented. Not by man, not by the masses, but by the ones who understand that wasted potential is more dangerous than failure. They see the pattern, not just the moments you speak, but the ones you don't. Not just what you do, but what you'll refuse to. You might think you're hiding behind timing or life's just hard right now, but the silence you think is harmless. It's deafening, especially when it's coming from someone who was built to disrupt. See, silence from noise makers is expected, but silence from weapons, that's a red flag. That's cause for alarm. They know you've got something because you're avoiding it. Excuses sound like lullabies to the comfortable, but to the watchers, they're signals, codes, patterns of behavior that say, this one's dangerous, but asleep. So they circle, they observe, they wait. Because they know something you haven't accepted yet. You weren't designed for safety. You weren't built to blend. And when someone like you stays quiet too long, it's only ever for one of two reasons: fear or denial. They're not judging the pain. They're measuring the pattern. Because pain is human. But repetition, that's intention. When you keep showing up with the same excuse, the same story, the same next time, that's no longer struggle. That's a choice. And when powerful people see you choosing to play small, they ask why. Because the ones who sleep on their purpose usually carry something that scares even them. You've convinced yourself you need more time, more clarity, more strength. But what if time's up? What if the next phase isn't about more, but about movement? They're not recording your silence just to shame you. They're tracking it because silence is data, and in your case, it's a valuable data. It tells them what you really fear, not failure. No, that's not it. You're not afraid of falling flat. You're afraid of what happens if you don't. If you finally rise and the world sees you without the mask, they see you holding back, smiling through storms, laughing off destiny like it's just some joke. But they're not laughing, they're writing, logging, studying the moments you were supposed to speak but didn't. The doors you didn't walk through. The battles you never entered. Not because you weren't called, but because you weren't convinced. You wanted a sign. Meanwhile, you were the sign. And now that you've stalled so many times, the silence itself has become your message. You don't realize how loud you are when you say nothing, not to them. They see your potential like a loaded weapon just sitting on a table, collecting dust, untouched, untapped, dangerous because it hasn't gone off yet. And every time you reach for it, only to pull back, they note that too. Because people who hover that close to purpose and still retreat, those are the ones you watch closest. Those are the ones who either explode or disappear. They're not angry. They're interested in whether you're going to keep wasting breath talking yourself out of destiny. Interested in whether the silence will win. Because excuses may work on your friends, your family, even yourself. But to those watching from the top, it's just noise in a quiet room. And it says everything. Only those with potential are placed under surveillance. Not the loud ones. Not the flashy ones. No, the watchers don't care about them. They're distractions, entertainers, noise to keep the crowd busy. But the ones who get watched, the ones who feel the weight of invisible eyes, those are the ones with something hidden, something sharp, something real. You're not being followed because you're famous. You're being followed because you're dangerous in ways you don't even understand yet. Ever notice how the pressure starts building when you finally stop pretending? When you start walking like you, no, something's inside you. That's when things shift. That's when eyes find you in places you didn't expect. Not always literal, but you feel it. Like the room changes when you enter. Like silence gets heavier when you speak. You chalk it up to anxiety, maybe paranoia. But it's not that. It's awareness. It's the response of a system that's trying to figure out what to do with someone who's stopped playing the part they were given. See, people who pose no threat don't get studied. They don't get labeled, tracked, or tested. They live freely in the open because there's nothing in them that might interrupt the cycle. But when you carry something different, something sacred, weighty, unstable, that's when the eyes come out. That's when the pressure rises. That's when doors start opening with strings attached. Not because you're special to them, but because you're a variable that hasn't been controlled yet. The ones who get watched are the ones who stopped being predictable. You stopped echoing what everyone else was saying. You stopped waiting for permission. And when a person stops being programmable, they become a question mark. And power doesn't like question marks. So what does it do? It studies. It records. It tests. not to destroy you. No, that would be too easy. It wants to see if you'll destroy yourself first. You thought that battle in your mind was just personal, that confusion, that tension, the constant pulling between who you were and who you're supposed to be. No, that's surveillance. That's pressure applied in silence. That's the watchers tweaking the temperature to see when you'll boil. They're not after your destruction. They're after your blueprint. They want to understand how someone like you was built, how someone with your background, your scars, your story, still hasn't broken like you were supposed to. Because you weren't meant to be studied. You were meant to be feared. But if they can understand you, decode your patterns, dissect your hesitations, they think they can contain you. That's why you feel like you're under a microscope. Because you are. Not to shame you, to analyze you, the quiet ones, the thinkers, the ones who walk through fire without broadcasting it. Those are the anomalies. And anomalies get attention. Ever wonder why the weight hasn't let up? Why the pressure feels heavier the more honest you become? That's not punishment. That's feedback. You're triggering sensors. Your movement is being tracked, not by GPS, but by impact. You don't need to announce yourself. Your energy arrives first. And that energy, it messes with things. It rearranges rooms. It causes discomfort in places built for control. That's why you're being watched. Not because of what you've done, but because of what you might still do. They don't watch those who've given up. They watch those who still have our choice. And your existence right now is proof that you haven't folded. Not fully. You still carry that thing they can't replicate, can't buy, can't fake. That's why you're under their eye. Because something in you still bends reality. And that kind of power, it can't be ignored.